Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we'll be reading Reiteration. It's a fan fiction from off of fanfiction.net. I know, what quite an original name, but that is where it came from. It's what I'm going to be reading, and I hope you like it. Here we go. Reiteration, Chapter 1. Let's see what you have for us today. Let me get into my reading voice. Being reborn was a very humbling experience. Rather, being a newborn was a humbling experience. It was only through these memories in my head that I was aware of that. Memories of a different life. One where I was older. One where I could speak and listen. One where I could see. I took my senses for granted, and it wasn't until I had them ripped from me, brutally and abruptly, that was when I realized how much I needed them, to go from seeing and smelling and hearing and everything, to experiencing almost nothing. It was the single most terrifying experience I've ever undergone. My arms and legs would not respond, and my voice, once capable of forming actual words, was now raw and untrained. My eyes could only make out blurry shapes, and I was sure they were nothing but maleficent. Maleficent? I don't know. Sometimes faces would even appear close to my eyes, long enough for me to focus on them, then vanish again. I could do nothing. I didn't toss around words like helpless very often, but that's exactly the state which I found myself in. The only sense I knew I retained was my ability to sense warmth, and that didn't help at all, because all that told me was that it was cold, so very, very cold, confused, scared, and helpless. I did the only thing I could in this state of being. I screamed, I cried, I wailed, I fussed, until eventually my throat was so raw that I could not make any sound at all. I was in a senseless, literally state of panic, and nothing could calm me. That, of course, only caused the blurry, ominous shapes to hover around me more often. It was never ending, which in turn set me off again, a very destructive cycle. Later, hours or days, I do not know, when I regained some semblance of rational thought, and came to the terms with the fact that I was useless, I realized just what had happened. I was a baby. It was impossible. Impossible. I had my memories in my head of streets and cars and walking and talking. It was all impossible. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I recognized the panic for what it was. All I cared about, though, was the fact that I could not breathe, and I would not have that taken from me, too. The blurry shape swooped in again. My breath became even shorter, and I was lost to unconsciousness in short order. When I woke later, I tried to stay calm. I did not know how old or why I was here or where here was. That was not staying calm. I took in a deep breath, now immediately aware of just how much damage I had done to my throat. I was also very much aware of the fact that I could only focus on my vision on objects immediately in front of me, and how that limited my world, and how my body would not move like I wanted. It was all so frustrating. I had memories of moving, of walking. I knew I could do so, but this body, this useless, senseless, helpless body. Another breath. Calm down. Calm. It occurred to me then that I know why baby cries all the time. Even with all my mental advantages, the physical limitation of my body left me in a violent temper. Right, so sight was out, movement was out. I could hear, but I could not understand, because of course it wouldn't be English. I didn't need my sight or sense of smell or touch or anything, so why should the language? This time I cut off the tantrum before it had a chance to even make me breathe heavier. No sense in losing my head over something I cannot change. I still held out hope that this was just a really realistic, extremely terrifying dream. I would wake up in my bed once it was over and forget about it within a few days. No, this was not real. This couldn't be real. It was some language I heard in a video or movie somewhere that they were speaking. I could not make out any details of the room. I hadn't seen the inside of a hospital in years. Not because my sight was bad. A face? One of blurs. Humans. They were humans, and of course they were humans. It was in my face. I could focus. I know my eyes weren't wide, surprised as I was too interested in the woman's face to care. Apparently, my mind wanted to go the extra mile now. If I started making up actual features for these things to have, the woman made a noise, drawing me from my thoughts. It sounded almost like she was babbling something. Cooing, maybe? Yes, that's a good word for it. She was cooing something at me. Baby talk, I guess. That was deeming. Doing something with my hand. Oh, her finger. It was more a reflex than anything. Grabbing the digit, the action was strangely calming. The nightmare robbed me of almost everything about my body that I took for granted, and being able to control it again, even if it was just a small part of it, flooded me with a profound sense of relief. The woman's tone raised in pitch, and I thought I saw a smile on her face. It was still hard to work out finer details. She sounded happy. Apparently I had done something right. I thought her eyebrows were not forward anymore, too. Is this my mother? Well, I was a baby in this place. A dream mother, maybe? It was startling aware that this was a dream, though. Was that even possible inside a dream? Could you know where... I didn't think so. It must be true because my memories told me I already had a mother. It couldn't be. No. My breathing hitched, and her face grew panicked. I'm sorry, I got lost. I am sorry, I got lost. I was checking the time. 7 minutes, that's not bad. Where was I? A dream mother, maybe? No, I'm past that. Her action was actually what clued me in. I was able to calm myself because of it. Immediately, she looked relieved, and I had an odd thought of how much fun it was seeing emotions passing over her. Her face at my slightest provocation. People were normally more guarded. She looked away from me then, brown hair loose from her shoulders. She said something to another man. Or another blur. Sorry. A human behind her. Her face withdrew, but thankfully let me hold on to her finger. It was still relieving to control my body, especially when my legs would not respond. Oh, another face? A man this time. Ah, I understand. Time to meet my parents. I was probably a strange child growing up. After the first year of my life, I gave up all hope of this being some crazy dream brought on by just the right combination of food or alcohol or whatever the hell I did to switch my mind into crazy dream mode. It was a depressing realization come to that my past life was over, or perhaps it never have happened. Maybe this was some kind of crazy afterlife. In the end, it didn't matter. I was here now, for better or worse. This was my life. All my memories, the people I'd known, my skills, the things I've done. None of it was worth it. None of it mattered anymore. I was alone. That knowledge left me with a rather gloomy outlook on life as a child. I was probably much quieter than I should have been, and I knew I was far too introspective. I possessed the mind of an adult, and I was stuck in the body of a child. How could I not be strange with two lives in my head? The lion's share of that lost time lost in thought. The time I spent silently thinking was geared toward trying to figure out where I was. Early on, I had thought of myself reborn into my own world, a different country or region, of course, given the language barrier, but certainly still on Earth. This afterlife, or whatever it was, I naively figured could only happen in the same place I lived originally. I never considered that I was on another world. I was really disobeyed of that exception when I left the house one day in my mother's arms, just in time to see someone with cat ears on the top of their head walk by. Not on Earth, then. Eventually, I reasoned out that I could do nothing about the where or why bits of being here. Wherever here was, it was a sobering realization and served to force me into giving up on ever seeing Earth again. I was moody for days, but the only thing I could think to do was end my life and see if I would wound up back on Earth. I didn't have the courage to do the deed, though, and adamantly, I was curious about this world. So instead, I made a decision to stay here and decided to focus on my physical skills. It was incredibly, horribly, indescribably annoying to know how to move around and still not be capable of it. In the end, I relearned how to roll over, crawl, walk, and run pretty quickly. It put me months ahead of the children that other parents would bring over to play with me, but I didn't care. Not being able to move independently was horrible. I used the fact that I remembered how to move already to my advantage. And so, the only remaining part was then to teach my body what my brain already knew. Originally, I was worried that I would learn the native language slower than my peers, but those worries turned into be unfounded. I was never ahead of anyone, but I was never behind either. My vocal cords were untrained in this dialect, in all dialects, and this time I did not have my knowledge to speed up my learning curve either. In addition to being quiet and introspective, I knew I was just as curious as any other developing child, perhaps even more so. My curiosity, unlike other children, sprouted from the fact that I was different, in a different world, and somehow, someway, I had memories of an old one. What was different here? Was I on another planet? In another solar system? Maybe a different dimension, crazy as it sounded, was the answer. There are humans here, after all. The tensions of humans evolving on another planet. The exact same way they had on Earth must have been immensely small, unless they weren't human at all. Just similar enough to fool me. I did see people do impossible things, like jumping from rooftops and healing cuts in seconds. In the end, whether or not these were humans was just as unimportant as why I was here. I was stuck here with these maybe humans, for better or worse. The technology was another interesting point for me. The tools were similar in purpose to the counterparts and in my memories, but oh so different in details. The cars, the trains, the airships, all of them were generally similar to what I remember from Earth, but all of them were incredibly different too. The fuel, in particular, struck me as odd. Dust? How did dust power vehicles? Ideas like that remind me of just how far away from home I was, or rather, what I used to think of as home. This place, Vale, had rapidly become home to me. What else could it be? I gave up on all hope of this being some crazy dream. On returning to Earth, this was my home now. I wasn't sure how I felt about that yet. Age 3. Children were cruel creatures. Maybe I was unaware of the fact the first time around, but with an adult mindset, it was depressingly obvious. They would alienate anyone they saw as different or strange, with a ferocity that left me stunned. Case in point, they were cruel. It was lunch at my daycare. These kids separated into their own social groups and went about messily destroying the food in front of them, all except for one. Me, of course. I, as per usual, sat ways from the other children. I was accepted into the groups for the most part, but I was not explicitly invited. It was a good thing. It was good that way, I figured. I could sit back and observe, so I knew what I needed to do to fool the caretakers into believing I was just another child. Things like that. Things like what activities I should be participating in and what skills I should be showing. I found it stressful, imitating my peers, and the daycare attendants found it worrying. They would come and talk to me so very often, usually a couple times a day, and I would be forced to take part in some meaningless game for the following half hour. Well, not forced, but if I outright refused them, they would just grow more attentive. For now, I think they just believed me shy and withdrawn. I did not want to give them a reason to expect anything more.
My mom says you're just an animal,
A boy said. His name was Latu, and he was standing over a faunus, a human with animal-like characteristics, as best as I could tell, hunched over his food, trying to draw less attention to himself.
Yeah, an animal.
That one was Abriel. Often he would act like Latu's second hand whenever they bullied a faunus. Of course, I very much doubted they saw it as bullying. It was just like their parents' attitudes towards faunus and rubbing off on them. They were too young to truly understand any form of opinions of their own. And although they did imitate what they saw adults doing, still, I did not know any better. Maybe the adults were right. I couldn't see any differences between the faunus and the humans, excluding the obvious physical traits, of course, which led me to believe that it was just baseless discrimination to which faunus was subjected. I couldn't confirm that though, and I didn't care enough to try. My life was hard enough already. Associating with the faunus would only make it harder. It was sad, certainly, that they were treated this way, but in the end, it didn't affect me. Perhaps even more depressing was the fact that the attendants did nothing to stop it. So I turned back to my food, annoyed but otherwise unconcerned. Children were cruel creatures. Age 4. My parents died when I was 4. We were in Forever Fall Forest, a place filled to the brim with beautiful red flowering trees. Beacon Academy, a place where I knew huntresses and hunters. Some sort of army, maybe, were trained and conducted a training exercise deeper in the forest. Maybe residents of the city proper used the yearly occurrence to venture into the otherwise somewhat dangerous forest. Just what made the forest dangerous was unknown to me. I figured it was just the wildlife because my parents couldn't tell me and wouldn't tell me. I couldn't ask a too specific question without it looking strange. I wasn't exactly supposed to know the forest was dangerous based upon the fact that the city residents would only venture into it when Beacon held their exercises. At any rate, we were in the forest. I was sitting under the shade of a large tree, watching my parents set out a picnic blanket, trying to figure out what the weird pressure in my head was. The pressure, had been around a lot lately. I was always much more aware of it when I stopped to think on it though. Almost like it was responding to my interest. I likened it to recalling a memory that would just not quite come. An almost physical presence that would either make me feel completely safe or utterly exhausted when I managed to make contact with it. It frightened me. Were I honest with myself, in my old life, I never had a presence in my head. It was strange. It was different. But most of all, it was unknown. I did not know what it was, or what it could do to me. All I knew was that it felt like something exerting pressure on my head, like a headache, but without the pain. For all I knew, it could be some kind of violent mental illness. But still, my curiosity recklessly drove me forward. Ethan! I flinched, startled. I realized my father was calling my name, and apparently he had been for a while. Sorry, Dad, I called as I scrambled to my feet and ran over to the food. I still had trouble responding to giving my name in this world. I had well over 2 decades worth of experience responding to a different one in my old life. 3 years would not make it a habit die completely. My mother laughed when I jumped on the picnic blanket and landed on my knees. I, for one, was ecstatic that I could do things like that and not have to deal with sore knees for the rest of the day. Sometimes being a kid was great. We ate, then, mostly in silence. My father was an electrician, as far as I can understand anyway. I did not know how electronics worked in Vale, so he could have a completely different job title. I just likened it to an electrician from Earth. Regardless of the name, though, its profession made it easier for some of my quirks to be explained away. I was a programmer in my past life, and that left me with a very objective mindset. I strived to be unbiased and still do. Subjective thoughts were suppressed to the point where I had almost no strong opinions on any topic. It made me a pretty boring conversationalist, sitting in front of a computer all day in and day out. It did not help either. Thankfully, though, my father was somewhat similar. Otherwise, all the time I spent observing people and generally not moving at all would be much more difficult to explain anyway. It was something I did a lot now, observing people. Usually I would watch other children to see just how much knowledge I should be displaying in class for foresight. when it presented with learning problems. Other times, I would watch adults discern more about Vale in this world. The fondness or a peculiar interest to me for a time. Kiddo, huh? I said, around a mouthful of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. At least that was the same. What you thinking about? Dad said, the crow's feet around his eyes crinkling as he smiled. I started. Kids thought, Kids' thoughts. I wrote off a list of questions about Vale that I could use in these settings or situations, things that would be obvious to adults but still unknown to me. Like why airships had 4 wings instead of 2. Perfect. I opened my mouth to ask just that, but snort, stopped short when I saw an odd-looking creature from the distance into the forest.
What's that?
I said, pointing. My previous question was forgotten entirely in the face of this new being, and sort of looked like a warthog from Earth, but a little larger. It had white plates covering its face and its spine. It looked generally menacing. A grim? My parents would try to scare me with stories of them from time to time, usually as a boogeyman, as warning, like the boogeyman. I had thought grim were fiction. This thing looked like what my parents described. Honey? My father said. Oh shit, do over. Honey? My father said, as he got to his feet, the food completely forgotten. Get Ethan out of here. And then my mother was hurriedly grabbing me in her arms. What? I tried to ask, confused. I could sense there was danger. The fear on my parents' face told me that much. But the creature was only half as tall as they were. It could hurt, certainly. The wicked-looking tusks told me that much. But surely it would scare when it's so much bigger than it is. But it did not scare. Instead, it curled itself into a ball, and like some demented hedgehog, threw itself at my father. A horrified scream ripped itself from my throat when I saw him flying by my mother and me, impacting a tree somewhere behind me. With a wet thud, my mom screamed. I reflexively shut my eyes and covered my ears. My adult mind understood danger much better than a 4-year-old mind would have. I knew now, with utter certainty, that we were in trouble, just like I knew the amount of blood on the ground was deadly to a human. And then I was flying through the air. My mother made a horrible choking sound as she hit the ground. A few seconds later, by a garbled attempt to say my name, it sounded like she was gargling water. Blood, my mind realized, as panic set in. The Grim was charging at me now. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I was defenseless and frozen. No one else was here. Get up. I obeyed. I ended up having to dive out of the Grim's path at the last second. One of its tugs chipped me, tearing my body, gashed down from my forearm. The air rushed out of my body in a forced gasp, and I landed on my back, but I knew I needed to get up, because that thing was. I scrambled to the left to avoid it this time, getting my feet under me just as it circled around and charged at me again. Desperately, I threw my hand out in front of me. Intuitively, I knew it would do nothing to stop death from coming for me, but the presence, a content feeling flooded my mind, and I immediately followed by a warm, powerful sensation. Goosebumps covered my arms, and the hair on my back of my neck stood on end. Time started to slow down around me. Picking out every detail of the girl's body was so simple now. I could see every scar, every wound that glowed an angry red, every blood stain, and the drop of blood that was drawn from its spawn. My parents. My arms grew incredibly hot for a split second before the heat fled, just as it appeared. The grim, only a few scant feet in front of me, bucked under a nearly translucent blue wave force. It was violently forced out of its self-included role and tossed boneless away from me. I wavered on my feet, exhausted and certain I was about to fall unconscious. I did not like that thought. I need to get up. I need to figure out what just had happened. I needed. A thud attracted my attention. I turned to my fallen vision in time to see the grim fall back to the ground, collapse, unmoving. Not a fairy tale after all. That was chapter 1. Damn, that was a long time to read. You don't understand. Oh, my hands went numb. Well, tell me what you like. Comment, like, and subscribe. You know that biz. Shit, my arms went numb. I will be continuing chapter 2, so look forward to that.